Hello, I'm Andrew Hara, the host of the Mom Squad. I wanted to tell you about my movies. All are available on Tubi, which is a free streaming service. The last one is a zombie drama about how a pandemic and isolation could drive a group of people mad. When the virus hits, John finds himself alone and scared until he meets Michael, his protector. But when Karina, another survivor, enters the mix, everything that John and Michael knew will be turned on its head. The last one is a zombie virus movie that's somehow even more relevant today. Plus, it has zombies. Check it out. Borderland is a mexploitation film about living in El Paso. When Sarah finds herself in debt to the cartels, she has until sunrise to find some missing monies with the help of her executioner. Borderland is a true midnight movie and a lot of fun. Finally, the documentary Humble Spirits tells the story of the Hahn family, including champion Jennifer Hahn from El Paso, Texas. The entire Hahn family has grown up in the combat sports and has helped shape who they are both in and out of the ring. Humble Spirits, a family of fighters, is the perfect documentary for boxing fans of all ages. Check out Tubi to watch all my films. Finally, The Empty Space, winner of multiple awards, including the Sacramento Horror Film Festival's Best of the Best, is a cosmic horror about Amy Andrews, who's dealing with anxiety and depression after a violent attack that killed her husband. As she tries to find herself, she starts to lose her grasp on reality. Or could it be something much more sinister? The Empty Space is full of twists and turns, with Grace DeWilder of Rue Morgue magazine calling it a powerful film full of excellent performances by practically every cast member. All of Andrew Hada's movies are available to rent or buy on streaming services such as Tubi, Amazon, and many other places. We hope that you help support us by watching these films. Now, let's start the Bomb Squad. What's up, guys? Welcome to the Bomb Squad live episode again. Oh yeah, you don't remember what position we were in. This is a month later. So today on our second special live episode, we are covering another classic that we wanted to talk about for a long time. 1994's Cemetery Man, or DellaMonte DellaMore.
DellaMorte, DellaMore, or the opposite, whatever. We're both wrong.
Directed by Michelle Sovani, writers by Tiziano Scavlani, Gianna Romani, starring Rupert Everett.
Yeah. He's just being Rupert Everett.
Francois Hagin Lazaro, and Annie Falchi. Now, Josh didn't realize what was happening when I asked William to do the plot synopsis. So, Josh, why don't you break down the plot of Cemetery Man for us?
Well, this man works in a cemetery. Some call him the engineer. He's he works there keeping the graves, but the dead keep coming back to life. So he has to kill them all over again.
Yeah.
But he is also impotent, and that plays a huge part in the movie. Way more of a part in the movie than you would think.
Yeah.
He has a mute and seemingly dumbstruck assistant who helps him dig graves and keep the place. And he gets into a lot of psychosexual situations, basically, revolving around this cemetery.
Like every Italian.
Yeah.
I think this movie is kind of, I don't even know if it's a bomb. It's just kind of unheard of because it's hard to find. Right now it's on Shudder, which is where we watched it. Go check it out. But I think it's one of those things where this movie's marketed as like this kind of fun zombie movie, and it is for a while.
Yeah.
But then it does other things, which are, it's almost like, because it's adapted from a comic book. And it almost feels like there's like you're reading comic book issues, and like every 15 minutes that issue changes. You know?
Yeah, it's definitely segments of the movie, and then the tonal shift very drastically.
Yeah, well, like
that makes a lot more sense.
One of the great things, like it opens, and then like a zombie knocks on his door, and my favorite thing is all the zombies in this movie look like zombies from the Thriller video.
Yeah, they definitely do. Like, everyone looks like they're in Thriller.
Yeah, like everyone, it's like very much like they're really filming on graveyards in like Italy, but everything looks like a Muppet set. Like there's so much fog anytime he opens the door, you know?
Super, super stylized.
Yeah, just random lights.
Which ends up working for the movie in a way that at the very, very end, you're like, oh my god, I understand
Yeah.
why this looks the way it looks. Yeah, I didn't realize this was in '94. I would have guessed this was like from like '86.
Yeah,
Right.
I didn't realize this was from the mid '90s.
definitely
early
feels
90s.
earlier. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a bonkers ass movie. we had watched this all three together actually, like a long time ago.
Yeah, over 10 years ago, I think. Yeah.
And I'd forgotten every single thing about it. And then like as soon as it started, like he shoots this zombie who's come back to life, and I was like, oh, I kind of remember this movie, but I had forgotten fucking everything. And this is like a really unique movie. This is like, it's fun, it's creepy, it's like sad.
Yeah.
But like, it's like, it's interesting to see like a European version of kind of like a Men in Black style, like comic booky action adventure movie.
Right.
It's like way headier, way more about like the inner conflicts, especially with like the impotence that this guy goes through that the whole town knows about for some reason.
Yeah.
But it's still trying to be fun and like wacky, but it does it in like just such an un-American way that's like, it's really unique.
And I think like especially when you look at you know, the way they kind of do it and the way they kind of play with a lot of the tropes, but because like you think of a movie like Hellboy, which is my favorite movie of all time, but the way he looks at the paranormal investigations is it's like, oh, he's just an everyman. Like Ghostbusters does the same thing where it's like he's just an everyman, but like you see this one and it's like you can tell that the writers were like, what if someone had to kill the dead, like the recently deceased coming back to life?
Right.
What would that do to his psyche and like how he viewed life and death and how he viewed people?
Mm-hmm.
And it's surprisingly dark the way they come up. Like I think at one point, and I guess we could. So this is about a caretaker. They call him the engineer, and he like falls in love with this girl, and he's like impotent, and she was married to like a rich guy, and so she's also never experienced true love, is how they explain it.
Yeah. She's like 20 years old, married to like a millionaire, really old dude.
Like 70-year-old guy.
And so they fall in love, and then they're like, before they even go on a date, they decide to have sex on his grave. And and he's like, why? And she's like, oh, because we don't hide we
share very open. Yeah.
And so then he comes back to life, which of course he does.
Yeah.
Oh, and then
they're having sex.
Yeah.
Like very graphic sex.
And and then she bites her. And so she dies. Oh, but you don't die from a bite. They say she died from a heart attack from being scared from seeing her husband.
Yeah.
And so then it's like he becomes obsessed with this girl, and he like, especially because he knows she's gonna come back to life.
Right, he's just like waiting for it essentially.
Yeah, and one of the interesting things is that she like comes back and he shoots her, but then he's like. Then he finds out later that she died of a heart attack, so she wasn't dead. She had just passed out. And so it's like, almost immediately they're throwing in this, like, implication that's like, oh, he also sometimes just kills people, you know? Like...
Yeah. It's kind of hard to tell if he's, like, insane or if he, like, sees all the things that he sees. It kind of has, like, an American Psycho vibe that kind of builds more as he like, goes into the town and as the story kind of progresses. It's like, what's real, But it doesn't really matter at the end of the day, which is kind of fun.
Yeah, and I think it kind of plays with a movie that we've seen called The Last Ones, where it's kind of that same thing where, like, it's not necessarily, like, we just talked about Last Action Hero not too long ago, and for us, just immediately right before this. And it's that way where this movie, like, Last Action Hero, it's constantly, like, winking at the audience, and this movie's also kind of trying to break down the genre a little bit, the horror, like, especially zombie. Yeah. But it's not winking at you, it's just like, let's take a different approach and see like how this kind of depressed Holden Caulfield would deal with, you know, like the dead coming back to life and falling in love for the first time, you know?
Totally. And one of you was talking yesterday about like, just like how sexuality is in movies. And it's like in a European film, it's like they'll shoot someone who's naked. And there's like, yeah, that person should be naked. But like an American movie would be like, oh, but look,
look how shocking this is. Whereas he's like, no, of course she'd be naked in this.
Yeah,
and it kind of goes along with like the rest of the content of the movie. Like they just have a different sensibility for like death and just how they do the whole thing.
Right.
It's just it feels so based in like American like genre, but just someone else just wrote a really cool story about it.
And it's
really wild.
And it's funny like how much the movie will just change gears for no reason. Like, he's like dealing with that girl being killed, and he might have killed her, and then like he meets like a bicycle teen.
Yeah.
A rude motorbike teen.
And he like
Claudio.
the guy is like Claudio's dating the mayor's daughter.
And
the
like
mayor,
a different girl too.
The mayor told him that he can't like help him kill the zombies because they don't have funding.
Yeah.
And so like then they go out and then they like Claudio and the girl and like 4 other motorcycles get into a car crash.
A brutal bus crash.
And then okay, so there's a bus full of nuns crash coming down a hill and Claudio going up and then they crash, killing Claudio and running over his head.
Like
and then the bus goes over the side and kills everyone in there.
Right.
Yeah.
So they're having like a mass funeral, essentially.
Yeah, there's literally like 30 coffins.
And this death scene takes place on like a sunny ass highway.
No,
and it's just like not even like
it's
trying to be like scary and gritty. It's just like,
yeah.
And then this fucking happened.
But it's not just nuns; it's nuns and Boy Scouts.
Yeah,
it's like killing stray Boy Scouts.
And not only
the movie that keep popping up.
Not only that, but like at the funeral where they're like carrying these dead Boy Scouts to the front, like DellaMorte is just like, they shouldn't have done that.
Like like cackling kind of,
Yeah,
and just like whatever, you know. It's because he's like friends with like the chief of police or who also is aware what's going on and does not care, you know.
Yeah. He's just sort of like this kind of like Columbo who's like actually apathetic. It's kind of like this, and the detective's always coming by and he's just like, well, there's a dead girl. Where were you between the hours of 3 and 4? And he's like, I was at the graveyard chilling. And he's like, well. And you always think that this cop is gonna like try and bust this engineer for like these like weird supernatural deaths, and right before he does it, he's always like, "Oh, yeah, I know you didn't do it. It was someone else." Which is kind of like where the American Psycho thing comes in.
Right.
It's like everybody's in American Psycho. No one knows it's Patrick Bateman,
even when he's like shouting that he did it.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it kind of is like it's sort of about like. I don't know. If we want to break it down thematically, I was kind of trying to figure out what they're kind of trying to go with. Because it's kind of like a slice of life theme movie in a way, mixed with all this like zombie stuff. And it's kind of like about the powerlessness that people feel, I think, sometimes. And like the main character, like he buries these people, but they still come back to life. And the whole fucking town hates him, and he just has like this kind of shit life that he can't really do anything about. So even whenever he's like about to get in trouble and like have some kind of like real experience, he still gets like turned away. Yeah. And it's just kind of like he just like lives this kind of like Sisyphean existence.
You could say he's trapped in a box or some kind of globe.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
he's
and to kind of add to that idea, I think like it jumps onto that American Psycho that like 90s, even Fight Club does this to a little extent. But Fight Club gives an answer where it's like both Patrick Bateman and this guy, and even the narrator, they're stuck in a world where like they've done everything that they should to be happy. Even him, like he's fallen in love, but like they're never gonna grab it because what they think will make them happy is not what is actually going to do it. Yeah, and they're just miserable all the time because they're constantly looking to the other side, and like literally in this case, he's looking to the other side, and he wants that, but he doesn't even really know what that is.
Yeah, it's just some other thing that will make him happy that doesn't even exist.
Yeah, so he's like constantly chasing after this thing that's like, but do you even want this? Like, is this even gonna make you happy? And like, I don't know. I'm Italian.
It's like it'd be nice if no one made fun of my impotence anymore, but
because at one point too, like he goes to the doctor. He's like, just cut my, castrate me essentially. Yeah. And the doctor's like, well, no, what if I chemically do it? So you're like, it'll be like you're castrated. So this will take a month to wear off, but then it immediately doesn't work. It's like no matter what he tries, he's still consumed by desires, essentially.
Yeah, and also like the way we're talking about it makes it seem like the tone is very dark, but it's literally like the funniest.
Yeah, we should say like Claudio comes back on his motorcycle, bursting out of the grave, flying through the air with one of his eyes has been replaced by like a traffic light. Yeah,
I think watching it again, the Claudio sequence is my favorite sequence because he was dating the mayor's daughter, but then he also had a different girlfriend who's like now kind of having a like midlife crisis where she's like, oh, did he love me more or her more? And it's like, he's dead.
Yeah, no, it doesn't matter.
And then when he comes back, she like goes with him, and then he goes and finds him, and Claudio's like eating her, and she's like, he can eat me. Anyone can do whatever they want, and I'm letting him eat me. What are you doing? Yeah. And so he shoots them both. But then there's a funny scene because he shoots them both, and then he kind of like looks at him like, oh, I can't believe I did that. And you're gonna have to shoot her eventually. She's literally getting eaten by a zombie.
Yeah.
See, and then that's because that's also like leads to his assistant Miyagi, which we haven't even really talked about. You can only say Nya. It's a very Hodor-esque situation. He was also in love with the mayor's daughter because she was nice to him once.
Yeah.
So he takes her head from her grave, and then the head is alive and kind of follows him around, like it just scurries across the ground, and it's just like, you know, and they're like in a relationship essentially. So you're like, okay, this is like
they found happiness.
This is like a silly farce.
Yeah.
And then it cuts to Death telling the engineer, you know, your job would be easier if you just killed people before they died.
Right.
So you only have to do it once. So then he's like, okay.
I guess I'll do that.
And he drives to town and finds the guys who've been bullying him or being upset and just guns them all down. You're like, oh, is this still like a funny comedy? Or is this about a serial killer?
Yeah.
Well, and then, because it takes that weird turn after the audio dies. Where he does start shooting random people.
He just starts killing,
And then he keeps seeing, like, they bring the actress back who played his love interest, and now he sees her, like, as the mayor's assistant or something.
Yeah, at first you think it's, like, her twin, but then you start to realize, like, oh, he's just starting to see every woman this way. You know?
And then she falls in love with someone, because she's never, like, had sex before, right? And then she gets, like, assaulted. And then she falls in love with her assault person. Very Italian.
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh yeah, it's just things that are happening.
Yeah.
And so
once we agreed to do it, it was fun.
Yeah, she's like, the mayor assaulted me, but then he did it nice, so it was okay after that. You're like, that's not how it works.
This was written by a man.
This was written by an Italian man, very clearly.
And so then he's mad at that, and he goes and like kills people in the hospital.
Yeah.
And then he like meets another girl who also looks like her, and he's like telling her he loves her, and he finds out that she's a prostitute, so he sets her on fire.
Yeah, he burns her down in bed
with her two roommates for no reason.
Yeah, it's like I said, this is you're like, ooh, I don't think people on Twitter should watch this movie.
Yeah,
because they'll get ideas.
Yeah, he would go. Well, he wouldn't even get ideas, but the discourse would like make it explode.
Yeah,
because it is that thing where like, especially if you want to watch movies where your protagonist is never wrong, this is not that.
Yeah.
And I think, like, to me, that's always the hardest thing about recommending. Like, I think, like, especially the Gallo films. I mean, you look at those, the Galileo films.
Giallo.
The Giallo. You look at those films, and, like Deep Red's good, Suspiria's good, but then you see some of them where it's like, oh, actually, Deep Red doesn't do it. They do deal with trans people, but they step away.
They pull it
but
back.
They do have that one where it was a common trope where it's like, oh, the killer's a trans person.
Yeah.
And it's like, because they don't know what they're doing.
That was a trope until like 10 years ago. Yeah. So it's not just.
And then also like, Galileo made it. Giallo. Made it popularized it.
Yeah.
Right.
And just like the amount of like sexual violence in those kind of Italian horror films was very big at the time, where like that kind of downplaying of rape, and so it's hard to be like, hey,
like, hey, check it out, it's a good time. But I mean, it can't be, but
turn it off after an hour.
Know what you're in for.
But I think like, again, I think that we were just talking about Last Action Hero and how it didn't go all the way.
Yeah.
And it's like, this one almost goes too far all the way. Like it goes past the way and doesn't really ever do a U-turn.
Right. It's kind of like the audience for this movie is like stuck in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean.
Yes.
It's like it's not really American enough for like Americans to like widely accept it, and like I don't really know how it did overseas, but I wonder if it's kind of like maybe like too American, because it's like, is it even like a famous movie? Like, how do we even find this movie?
I know that like the way I found it was that when you used to rent movies, they would have trailers, and we saw a trailer for this, and the trailer for this doesn't cover anything in the second half. It's all just like, he's got a bad job, and he's
he's down on his luck.
And so we checked it out, and it was just so insane. Like, even if you don't like this movie, if you watch it, there's gonna be parts that you'll never really forget because they don't do that in other movies, for better and worse. But
and I promise you will not see the ending coming.
You're
like, okay.
But if you're in the mood for like some like wacky headshots, like every time he like shoots one of the Boy Scouts, like whatever
Oh,
part
it
of their head gets hit, it's just like
yeah.
And I do want to
it's
say,
She's got
unreal.
insanely
It's
good
so good.
effects.
some of the best effects, like, and even some of the
they were
silly.
convincing.
There's like a part where Nagi,
Nagini, no, that's
Ga ga
and Gani,
Gagi
something like that.
whatever his assistant's name is,
Miyagi.
he's like walking down the road with his like zombie head bride, and she's like just kind of skipping, like you just see the head bouncing up and down, following her, and it's like this is a fun time.
Yeah.
Right, they found happiness.
Yeah, and like we even talked about this when we were watching it, but she has like the old classic Frankenstein scars that they don't really put on dead bodies anymore.
Yeah. It's very lovingly crafted, this movie.
Yeah. There's especially a love for like the production design of this movie.
Yeah.
Like, the production design, the creature design, the like cinematography, it all blends so well together.
Right.
Like, because it's not just like when he sees death and he tells them to like go kill the living, it's like a bunch of like rags are flying in the air, and then they suddenly like stand up, and it's just like the skeleton that's made of the rags now.
Yeah,
he's like talking to him like, oh, "Kill the living."
Yeah,
and
it's like metal as fuck.
Yes, yeah. Or like when they make love for the first time, they go into like one of the tombs of
the ossuary.
The ossuary.
Oh yeah, and like the skeleton arms are coming down on her and stuff. Yeah,
it was crazy.
And then there's like a skeleton, and she like kind of gets wrapped up into it, and so rips off her shirt, and she's like freaked out even more, and it's such like a, I don't know, it's just like every part of this movie, like they put so much effort into that. It makes it.
Yeah, honestly, knowing that it was a comic before, like I had no idea about that until just now.
Oh, right.
Like that totally answers a lot of questions. Like just like that kind of like how bonkers and grandiose it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's especially interesting to think that like most people knew Rupert Everett for the first time from My Best Friend's Wedding.
Yeah.
They're like, let's watch that fun zombie movie he made. And
right,
it's like, you're in for a surprise, guys.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's good. I think it's worth watching. If you're a horror fan, you're probably more attuned to the tone of this film because it does get pretty dark.
Yeah.
If you're not a horror fan, I would still check it out, especially if you're a fan of like creature effects or effects. Like every time someone gets killed, it's an interesting effect. Like they're rolling over heads. They're like stabbing people in the head with the shovel. They're like constantly digging graves, but it all looks so great, you know?
Right. And it is all in the same area all the time, but it never gets old, like looking at it. Like it's all really fun to see.
Well, and there's like a great scene where they're like, again, when we talked about this yesterday, just the way that Europeans film a sex scene where it's like, in America, it's all about titillation, but in Europe,
like a shame element to it.
Yeah. And over there, they're like, they've gotten over the shame, and now they're like, wouldn't it be cool if it looked like she had angel wings when she writes him?
Yeah. She just raises it. Like,
it's like obviously she would be doing that.
Yeah,
you
like,
have the wings behind her.
Yeah.
It's called symbolism, idiots.
Yeah.
Flying high.
And I think it also helps, and maybe it's like, it's also funny with foreign films where I don't know the language, because you're like, I don't know if anyone's doing a good or bad job acting, because they don't really...
Yeah.
But it's a fun time. I do wonder if... because I know that it's the same writer for the comic book as the guy who wrote Dylan Dog, which is another Italian horror.
Yeah,
also got made into a movie called... with Brandon Routh.
Yeah, I know it came out. I just never saw it.
We saw it because of the relationship to this movie, and I was like, it's not as good. Oh, he did The Church, which is a really cool movie. It's like, it's kind of the same. It's about this church that they find, and it has like a gateway to hell.
Oh, okay.
Kind of like, what's that other movie that's like The Fog? But the European version.
Right.
So this is a director who really likes to play with monsters and demons and like being wet. Like everything slimy.
Very elemental.
Yeah. But I think like, especially if, you're trying to get into Italian horror, European horror, it's a good start. Because it is, it's just going to go even darker from here. At least this one has jokes.
Yeah. It's got some comedic elements to it, so it's nice.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
Like 2 thumbs way up for sure. This is like a great cult classic. Absolutely.
Yeah. And this is kind of like, when you think of cult classics, you think of a movie like this, like the midnight movies, like Borderland, where it's almost like trying to be a little offensive, or like not being offensive, but it's like, let's explore
Yeah.
some weird.
Yeah,
avenues.
let's take this to an extreme that
Yeah.
might alienate some people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think especially in a movie like this, because like I know that Kinds of Kindness by Yargos is out right now, and that one's like that's super alienating, but like you see the preview and it doesn't even really tell you what it's about.
Yeah.
But it just kind of looks a little weird, and you're like, yeah, that's probably gonna be alienating. Where it's like this one, it kind of almost traps you into thinking it's gonna be like a
You're like, yeah, he kills zombies. I get it. You're like, oh, I don't get it. And
Yeah.
This is
Especially because the opening is pretty much like a sitcom opening.
yeah, like wah wah.
It's like tuk tuk tuk.
Yeah. I mean, this movie is essentially just like the Bat Out of Hell Meatloaf album cover as a movie. Like it's like the most like stoner zombie film. Like this is like it's upsetting in that there's like death and stuff, but it's like it's not like Yorgos in the way that it's like not gonna like freak you out. Like it's like you could get really high and watch this with some friends and it would be like so fun. Like you're not gonna get like the heebie-jeebies or anything.
I would recommend getting high and watching this with your most open-minded friends.
Absolutely.
You don't want to watch it with like the church girl because she's gonna kill your high.
yeah.
She's gonna kill your high by the first sex scene, and it's just not gonna get better.
It's gonna be weird. Yeah.
But
We watched it together.
We watched it.
This is a group that watched it together.
Yeah,
and it was fine.
I think we've only watched this movie together.
Yeah. I was like,
and they were showing it at the theaters. I think it is kind of having a resurgence. I've heard about it a lot more.
oh really?
Yeah, I remember like my copy of this is like I bought it from Blockbuster when it was closing down, and that's the only time I've ever seen a DVD version of this movie.
Yeah.
And so I think it's like it's just such an it's like that niche thing, but like all like that's what to me is great about horror is that there's like action movies that no one's ever heard of, but like no one talks about them. Where like horror films, like they'll have fans even if it's like, oh, I've seen that movie once on Tubi, you know, but I love it, you know.
Absolutely.
And so that's why I always like to see, and especially like some of these like cult classics where you watch them and it's like, oh, I know it's immediately why.
Yeah.
This isn't mainstream.
Right.
And this movie is that. And I think like it is that thing where, and this movie isn't that controversial, but it is controversial enough where it's like, yeah, this is the kind of stuff we should be exploring in media, you know, because it just makes it more interesting.
Yeah. You're trying to find these like just strangely cut gems.
Yeah. These uncut gems. Yeah, I think it's a good movie. So, William, if you're going to recommend this movie, who would you recommend it to?
Just whoever you meet at the dispensary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think if like you like Argento, if you like Italian films, or if you like if you like the history of horror, I think it's an interesting film.
If you're looking for like a good time, if you're looking for like a little meat in your cults, like this kind of has it, but it's also just like so fun, and like if you love massive amounts of violence, like it does that, but with like the most like fun flavor. It's like if you like the movie Cabin in the Woods, you would absolutely love this movie.
Yeah, I could see that.
Very similar, like not story wise, but just kind of like scary but silly. And I feel like the scary silly is like really hard to like really nail, and this one absolutely nails it on the head.
Correct. Yeah, Josh.
Same.
Yeah, I think like
back to you.
I just think, especially now that it's on Shudder and you can kind of find it, it's definitely worth a watch. It's definitely worth like exploring, making sure that this is the kind of movie you like, and just having a good time. But yeah,
it's definitely it's. I also feel like it's one of those where it's like, it's like a good like. Oh, you can recommend this because it's almost certain the person you're recommending to has never seen it. So you're not like, you're not telling, you're truly telling them about a hidden gem. You're not just like, have you seen Texas Chainsaw Massacre 4? It's like, no, this is truly like a weird movie nobody's ever seen.
Yeah.
You know?
To be fair, there is, I do use this as like, recommend a movie you've never seen. It's like this one.
Yeah.
But every once in a while you get slapped down by like, oh yeah, I saw that one.
Right. So that's all I had. So,
Audition.
Give me a minute. Yeah, this is the most like Alamo Drafthouse, like Weird Wednesday. Kind of deep cut.
Yeah, like if you saw this at a drive-in theater, this would be the perfect.
Yeah,
this would be a great job.
Although no drive-in theater would show explicit movies.
The multiple sex and assault scenes.
Yeah, 2 a.m.
Yeah,
but it is that thing where like you see American sex scenes and they're just like so neutered, and this one's just like no, it's a sex scene.
Yeah, it was.
You're watching.
Yeah.
That was so funny. When
Yeah.
she like raised up, I was like, oh wow.
And again, like they just play with it, like the camera angle from above. Like it's just so interesting.
Yeah.
It's a good time, guys. We recommend watching it. And then, but yeah. And so this is our another live episode. How many more do we have? You'll have to find out by subscribing. And so we will see you guys next time on the live Bomb Squad.
I mean, it's live every time. We're just not in the same place.
It's actually never
That's
live.
not. You're not like responding to pre-recorded webcam footage of us normally.
I am.
Sometimes, yeah.